Okay, greetings. My name is Sean Whiteley. We're coming to you live from Salesforce Live, and for the next 25 minutes, we're going to be talking about the importance of mobile. I've got Bing Yang and Craig Villamore, two of our thought leaders on mobile from Salesforce. Craig Villamore focuses on design of our mobile applications, and Bing Yang owns our go-to-market strategy for our mobile applications. So we're gonna talk about some of the themes and things that are happening in this tsunami of mobile that's upon us right now. And I'm gonna ask some questions to you guys, and you guys are gonna take some questions from the web, and we should have a pretty good conversation. So what is behind this explosion in mobile applications? I mean, anyone who's read Mary Meeker's Internet Report, which I encourage anyone to read if they haven't read it, knows that smartphone sales will outpace PC sales over the next 12 to 18 months, which is amazing. Why do you think that this mobile tsunami is upon us right now?
So I think a lot of this, especially in terms of smartphones, really started with the iPhone. And then the introduction of the App Store, right? And so giving people this opportunity to publish apps and to have a sort of a viable marketplace for those apps has caused a really big explosion in development there.
Yeah, if we think back, my first computing device, I guess we can call it, was a Pentium computer in 1997. And you know, in terms of the power, what it could accomplish, what kind of programs it could run, you know, nothing near the devices that we see today that fit in the palm of your hand. And that thing also cost me, I think, $3,500 or something like that. So, you know, with the price of things dropping, with amazing ways to create like smaller technology, new form factors, and of course with the introduction of the iPhone being kind of a pivotal moment, just new things were possible on a mobile device that are not possible on a desktop, are not possible because, you know, first of all, a mobile device is always connected. So the amount of connectivity that's around is just incredible. You don't have to dial up on a modem anymore. If you just think back to those times, where we are now, it's just an incredible difference. And not only that, it's the fact that, you know, a mobile device is where you are. It's where you are when you want to use a software application. So it's not about, you know, forcing yourself or having to sit at a desk to be able to use software. But it's, you know, let's take Facebook, for example. It's when you see something on the street and it's interesting to you and you want to share it to your friends, you can do it right there. That was just never possible before. So it's all these new mobile use cases that you know, have made just every consumer, not just the, you know, the computer geeks like I was in high school, but every consumer really just attach their mobile phone because it's there when they want it. It's there when they, you know, when they want to do things like share a photo or share a thought on Twitter or whatever it might be.
Yeah, always on, always connected, knows where you are.
Exactly.
You know, Facebook, your Facebook analogy is an interesting one, and Facebook, as we all know, has 500 million users. I think 125 million of those users access Facebook from a mobile device, and those users are twice as active. And I think a lot of what is behind that is the fact that it's always on, you're always connected, and it always knows where you are. It's a better experience. So
absolutely.
You guys have designed and built mobile applications, several in the recent months. Craig, you actually built our first native iPad app that we just actually shipped a couple days ago.
Yep,
tell us about some of the considerations that you made when you were thinking about designing for the iPad versus the iPhone.
Sure. Yeah, I think, versus the iPhone. So, I mean, obviously the form factor is quite a bit different. When we first started looking at designing for iPad, you know, like everybody else, we were sort of learning as we were going. One of the things that we did is we tended to lean quite a bit on the Apple Human Interface Guidelines, and then we also went out and looked at you know, consumer applications and best-of-breed applications to figure out which of these apps really shine and which of these are kind of falling flat. And there was a pretty decent mix at the beginning as people were trying to figure out what was going on. So if you look at the iPad app for Chatter, you'll see that it actually borrows a lot of conventions from things like Apple Mail, and also from Apple's Photos application. And so I think what we really wanted to do was to make sure, so the other thing I'd mention is, we wanted to make sure that we were using sort of different gestures than you might use on a phone as well. So if you saw the keynote yesterday, you saw Craig do the demo where there was an attached document, PowerPoint presentation, and you could do this sort of pinch spread gesture to see what pages are inside that document. And we borrowed that from Apple's Photos application, and so for us, I think that's been really important. That we don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel with these things. We want to find models that work really well and then apply those very quickly to our product.
Yeah, I think a big thing up front in the thought process of designing and conceiving a mobile app is just to know the user. The fact that they probably are not going to devote 5-10 minutes to this application like you might devote to a desktop application, that they're probably doing something else. They're probably walking, hopefully not driving, although we've all done that before. But they're walking, they want to do it really quickly, right? So when you take a desktop application, you really have a lot of layout space on your screen.
You have a lot of real estate.
A lot of real estate. People can spend a lot of time with it, navigating and so forth. But the apps that are the best are the ones with the big buttons, the ones that say, we know this is what you want to do, we know this is the type of use case that makes sense when you're on the go. So you start from there, and really, I think, to uniquely look at it as a mobile application instead of, let's say, a port of your desktop application, right? To say, how can I redesign our product experience, especially for people that are on the go, people that want to do something really quickly.
Right. So, one of the questions, one of the things people need to consider when building a mobile application is what the application is going to do, who's going to use it, what kind of data they're going to consume, and what those interactions are going to be with this mobile application.
Right.
So the big question people are really struggling with is HTML5 versus native. We've all heard about HTML5. It's open, it's a standard. We know that at some point it's going to be the de facto way to build mobile applications. Yep. But right now it seems that a lot of people are still building native. They're building native for Android and for iOS, and they're building these native applications across devices, which is very expensive, it's labor intensive, it's difficult to maintain. So what are some of the considerations to take into account when you're thinking about building a mobile application and whether or not to go the HTML5 route versus the native route?
Sure. So I might disagree with you just a little bit. I personally don't
It's
believe
your
that.
prerogative.
I personally don't necessarily believe that HTML5 is going to be the ultimate solution, and we'll take dissensions from the viewers as well. But there are things on there are native capabilities with a phone, with a smartphone, that really don't make sense on the desktop web, and I think are ways that we'll always see are differentiators between native applications and HTML5. So just one example would be access to your phone's camera. So all of us have taken a picture and posted it on Facebook. That's currently not possible.
Or on Chatter.
Right, or on Chatter. And that's currently not possible with HTML5. So there are things like that, and I think things that are coming, or things that you may have seen, like push notifications, right? Those are things that are only possible with native applications. I think things coming down the pipe, like mobile payments, right? It's something that really, the hardware and software vendors are have to work very closely with financial institutions, and the security that a native functionality offers is going to be very important to that. That said, I think HTML5, there's a huge need for it. Just building native applications across all the 4 or 5 major platforms is very intensive on developers. So HTML5 is definitely moving along at the pace it needs to because developers, quite frankly, need it. And but I think I see a world where it's going to be partially native and partially HTML5, and there are great ways to make those two work together as well.
Great. So where do you sit, Craig, on this HTML5 versus native discussion?
Yeah, so I think there's, as Bing was saying, I think there's a lot of promise in HTML5. I think when you look at the sort of device diversity, there's more devices coming out on the market all the time. There's more operating systems coming out on the market all the time. And so HTML5 starts to make more and more sense in terms of, how do I develop across a lot of platforms, because it's extremely resource intensive to develop native applications. So I think in the long term, I see a lot more HTML5 applications being built, and HTML5 will get more robust. I think on the other side, though, there are some kind of, there's some performance implications. Native applications, when they're well written, tend to be extremely performant. You also have access to sensors, which I think Bing was mentioning. There's some really interesting stuff coming up with near-field communications, and I think Google's Nexus S is introducing that. We're kind of expecting that from iPhone 5. And so if you want access to things like, the camera, the near-field communication sensor, the gyroscope, and those sorts of things, you're typically going to want to use a native application.
Interesting. So, if you look on any job posting board right now, you'll see that HTML5 developers are in tremendous demand. But in even more demand, you're seeing geolocation, specialized developers and engineers that can build geospatial apps and geolocation.
Yep.
Why is that? Where is geolocation going? I mean, I think everyone is starting to see it creep into applications, especially on the consumer web. But how about for the enterprise? What is the implication of geolocation in the enterprise?
Yeah, so I think for enterprises, geolocation is really interesting, right? If you think about Foursquare and Gowalla, those are fun. They're kind of game-like, right? You check in to get points, or you check in to get badges and things like that. I think what's really interesting on the enterprise side is this concept of maybe not necessarily checking in, but that the device knows where you are. So let's say I'm a sales rep, I'm a field sales rep, and I'm out somewhere and I've got some free time, and hey, I just want to drop in on some of my customers, right? Or maybe some leads. And so I can open up the device, it knows where I am, and it can say, hey, within 5 miles, here are 10 customers that you can go and visit, and here's the history of when's the last time I spoke to them and what did I speak to them about. So I think geolocation, especially in the enterprise context, has huge value and huge potential.
On the flip side, with enterprises, and being able to reach consumers, geolocation is also a huge thing. So you have consumer apps where, people are voluntarily sharing their location. It really gives a new dimension to the kind of marketing data that marketing organizations can use to reach their consumers. So you've seen things like, of course, the Groupons of the world and the Foursquares, and being able to connect to a consumer that is nearby. That's just another dimension I think is that we're going to see explode over the next couple of years.
Yep.
It's really exciting.
Great. So we've talked about, if you're just joining us right now, we've talked about some of the big topics in mobile. We've talked about what's behind this explosion in mobile adoption, both on the consumer web and in the enterprise. We've talked about, the age-old discussion now about HTML5 versus native. We've talked about some design philosophies. Why don't we take some questions from the web? So here's a question that's coming from the web. It says, Salesforce app for iPhone has been up for about 30 days now. What's the best way to go get this application? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You just go to the App Store and you just search for Salesforce Chatter, and you can get the Chatter application. We also have a CRM application, which is under Salesforce. So if you look under Salesforce on the App Store, you should find all of our mobile offerings, which are our CRM offering, as well as our Chatter offering. And also, you'll see the iPad listing for Chatter as well.
Right.
Let's take another question here. Oh. Okay. Okay, here's a good question. Bing and Craig, what are a couple of your favorite mobile applications, and why?
So one of my favorites right now is an app called Instagram, iPhone application. The thing that I think is really interesting about, I think in general, photos is a great use case for mobile phones, and we see that when we started using Chatter on our phones, a lot of it was taking pictures, like of this event. What do our booths look like, and these sorts of things. So the photos are really compelling for the feed. Instagram is this consumer application that's really just built around sharing photos, and you can apply filters to those photos and then send them out across your social networks. And I think the really fascinating thing with Instagram is that they built that application with no way to sign up for their service except to download the app, right? So you download this application, you do the really simple registration process through the phone itself, and the website actually doesn't have any registration whatsoever. So they definitely took sort of a mobile-first approach with, with that product. So I think it's pretty fascinating.
For me, I would have to say it's a product called Flipboard that is for the iPad. And what it does is it will, there's many different ways to use Twitter. You can use it to have conversations with your network. The way I use it a lot is to get stories, to get the latest news. So because it's so instant, so real time, your network tells you what's important. So I love using Twitter to get news. And Flipboard is another one of these just great use cases that take advantage of everything mobile devices have to offer. So on the iPad, what it does is it will actually digest all of the stories that are in your stream from Facebook and Twitter and turn it into kind of like a magazine. And you can flip through it using the iPad's touchscreen. They'll lay it out with pictures, and it's just really gorgeous and a really great way to use Twitter and use Facebook to get the news.
Yeah, Flipboard's great. Yeah. And my favorite app has got to be Epicurious. I am an aspiring chef. Far from being a real chef, but Epicurious takes me closer than I've ever been. It has a beautiful layout, great interaction design, and they've actually thought about the fact that you need to go shopping for ingredients after you use the app. So actually you can email the ingredients right from the recipe that you see right to your phone, and you can go shopping. So it's really a great thing. So
yeah, it's a great app.
There's a couple really interesting comments coming in through the web, and one of them I'd like to address is that this is sort of more of a comment that mobile computing will be limited by your battery on your device, so your apps will have to be in the cloud. And if you've ever heard the CEO Eric Schmidt of Google talk about mobile, he's of course famous for saying mobile first. Right. You should think about mobile first when you're trying to solve a business problem as opposed to an afterthought. And one of the things he talks about is that the secret sauce behind mobile is cloud computing. That having a mobile device in your hand is like having millions and millions of servers in your hand. Can you talk a little bit to sort of this relationship between cloud computing and mobility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're at Salesforce. We're extremely excited about mobile because I think it really is a big differentiator for cloud computing. Let's think about some of the things that the Android phone does. So you can, let's say you're using Android for Chatter for Android, which is coming out soon, and you want to speak into it instead of type. It's extremely intensive to process, a voice signal and turn it into text. But if you can send it over to a server or millions of servers that Google has behind their Android phones and turn it into text, it's going to save you battery life. It's going to be fast. It's going to be so. Same goes for Salesforce. I mean, you're storing tons and tons of data in the cloud. As amazing as these devices are, there's limits to it. But because you're connected to the cloud, you have all that data at your fingertips. All the security, all the customization can happen on our cloud, but show up on your device.
And that's actually a good segue to my next question. We've seen these amazing consumer applications that have come out for mobile devices, and they just explode in terms of adoption. But building a web application for your enterprise that has your mission critical data on it and has to meet the requirements of your IT organization. What are some of the things that enterprises need to think about when they build mobile applications that maybe perhaps consumer web application developers don't have to think about?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, enterprise software by its nature tends to be very, very customized, right? And I think one of the challenges, just in general, is how to get that level of customization into the UI and still keep the UI simple, because it's incredibly important to have applications that are very approachable. When I go to launch that application, I should know what it's going to do, and then it should deliver me that value very quickly. And so it's really about figuring out what are the key bits of information that you need to retrieve in the field, and what are the key bits of information that you need to collect in the field, and then trying to rely on the device a little bit to collect some of that data for you, like maybe location or something like that. So I think the big challenges are really around, there's a lot of complexity in the enterprise, and rethinking what you absolutely need to have on the go, I think is critical.
So there's another question that's come in from the stream. Mobile is limited because of the network. 3G doesn't cut it. I think we've all experienced frustrations with connectivity and speed and bandwidth. So can you speak a little bit to LTE, long-term evolution, and what that will mean to mobile computing?
Do you want to take that, or I can take that? Yeah, I think that connectivity is becoming more ubiquitous all the time. It's also the speeds are increasing. Really hopeful with what's coming next, and I think we'll see. Bing talked a little bit about sort of the speech recognition aspects of things, and then Google's got a product called Goggles, and these are pretty compute-intensive operations and can be data-intensive operations that they're sort of just scratching the surface right now, and as we get more bandwidth and better coverage, I think we're going to see some really amazing stuff.
That's definitely the limitation, but I think we know it's coming, right? We know that bandwidth is going to just explode, and tons of companies, great companies, are working on that. I think it's also very important for enterprise applications. Going back to your last question a little bit, for enterprise applications to think about if there might be an offline use case. So, for example, Salesforce Mobile supports offline storage of your data. So, even when you do run into that dead spot, you can still get your data, and then it'll sync up later on. So, if you're designing an enterprise application, that's important to think about in the short term. But we all know it's coming. That in the future it's going to be ubiquitous, connectivity.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things I don't think we've talked about today, which I personally think is probably a big factor in this mobile explosion, are the mobile marketplaces. So historically there's never been a place where you've had an enormous marketplace of mobile innovation that's so easily accessible, like the App Store and the BlackBerry world and the Android marketplace. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what impact that has had on the enterprise and how these sort of mobile marketplaces have emerged?
I'll let our marketing guy do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. So you spoke to some of the mobile marketplaces that are out there, and I think those really came out of mobile raising the bar on usability of the app, not only the apps themselves, like I talked about before, needing to be simple and easy to use, but also like how do you get an app, right? They've raised the bar on that as well, and I think we saw the announcement of a Chrome marketplace in this past week, and it has less to do with mobile, but app stores in general have really set a bar for application delivery, and of course, Apple is also coming out with the Mac App Store, so it's pretty amazing the impact it's had. I think mobile in general is just raising the level of the bar on usability all across the board.
Yeah. So the other thing I was just going to mention, I think that's really interesting, is that it opens up so much opportunity for developers that, if you think about traditional boxed software, a developer would have had to publish the software, get it on the shelf somewhere, and get people to notice it, right? And so that, getting across all of those barriers is incredibly difficult. And today, you've got a marketplace. If you build a great app and you can get enough buzz around it, you don't need to be a giant company. And so the bar to get to your product on market is very low now. And so I think that's why we're seeing a ton of innovation as well.
Sure.
Another thing I like about it is that when you go and see an app and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, that feedback is coming directly from people that have used it. So just, let's contrast that to searching for an application, getting an ad, and having to dig through their web marketing. So it's just a more direct view at just how useful this app is. So it's really changed the game in that front too.
Great. So we're going to need to wrap up. I want to thank you guys for coming on and talking about how important mobile is. I'm going to finish up with a quick answer from each of you. What's the next big thing in mobility? Is it e-commerce, or is it something else?
Good question.
So 5 seconds or less.
I mentioned this before. I think mobile payments are huge. I just lost my wallet last week. I wish it was already here.
I agree. NFC is going to be huge.
And our last question from the web, what device from Salesforce has the strongest mobile capabilities?
What device from Salesforce? I think they all have their strengths across the board. I mean, we've built our apps to leverage the unique strengths of all the devices, and we're really excited to explore that, and we're going to really continue to innovate on all the different devices. Yeah.
Okay, great. And if you guys had to make a bet on e-commerce, who do you think is most well poised to make a big play in this?
Trying to get us in trouble?
Yeah, I don't know. Too early to tell.
Okay. Well, once again, I want to thank you guys, Craig Villamore, Bing Yang, two of our mobile thought leaders. I appreciate your time. And
Thanks,
everyone
Sean.
on the web, thank you for all the great questions, and thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thanks.